Friday, 2:47 p.m. The casket lid closed. My phone buzzed. A text from my dead husband's number. I am still alive. Trust no one. I froze in the church hallway while people hugged me and talked about casseroles. 10 minutes later, another ping. Our shop thermostat moved to 72 degrees, changed by Tom's profile. I drove home shaking. The shop door stuck like always, then opened. Inside was wrong. Too clean. Tools lined up like a brochure. Old Buddy, Tom's hammer, missing. On the bench, his metal lunch pail with my name written in black marker. Inside, a key tag Locksbox 317, East Side Storage, and a note in Tom's careful print. If anybody's telling you I'm gone, check 317. Call June Harper at the recorder's office. Don't sign anything. T. I checked his email. A bank alert. $2,200 cash withdrawal at 2:14 p.m. Then the thermostat pinged again, back to 70 degrees by Tom's profile. I opened Locksbox 317, a cheap safe. Our anniversary code opened it. Inside, a voice recorder and notarized papers. I press play. June, it's Tom. If I don't make it home, there's a reason. Paige and Colton keep pushing power of attorney. Someone's calling about an intake. They used my name. Don't let Nora sign anything. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow the key. I'm going to call June. I'm going to the pharmacy that just texted, "Hi, Tom, your refill is ready." And before this day ends, we will open a door at Whispering Pines. And you will see who is on the other side. My name is Nora Whitfield, and I am 67 years old. If you had asked me 6 months ago what could still surprise a woman who has buried her parents, raised a daughter, and paid off a 30-year mortgage on a house with a stubborn front door, I would have said not much, but I was wrong. What happened after my husband's memorial service forced me to relearn everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the quiet ways control can put on a friendly face and walk through your door. The Sunday after the memorial, our church held a potluck in the fellowship hall. Maple Ridge, Ohio is the sort of place where you don't buy a rotisserie chicken without 3 people asking how your azaleas are doing. We're friendly, nosy, generous, and we bring food when we don't know what else to do. So the folding table sagged with crock pots of chili and little name tags stuck into casseroles, Tina's mac, Joyce's green beans, pastor's wife's famous cornbread. Someone had ordered a Costco sheet cake with pale blue "in loving memory of Tom" squiggled across the icing. I was a moving target for hugs and napkins and sentences that started with, "You know what Tom always said." I answered the same questions until the words felt like pebbles in my mouth. How are you holding up? Are you sleeping? Do you need anything? I nodded and said thank you and tried not to stare at the punch bowl because the red liquid looked like a stop sign and everything in me was screaming to stop, stop, stop. My phone buzzed in my purse. I almost didn't look. Grief had made the sound of a text feel like a doorbell you don't want to answer. But habit is stronger than grief sometimes. I slid the phone out and read the screen. "Hi, Tom. Your refill is ready at Riverbend Pharmacy. See you by 4 p.m. I read it again. There it was, chirpy as a reminder to rotate your tires. "Hi, Tom. Your refill is ready." For a second, I felt outrageous anger at a computer, as if the message were a joke at my expense. But then I looked at the details. Tom's name, Tom's number. It was his profile on the pharmacy account. The refill was for a cholesterol medication he'd taken for years. I could see the last pickup dates, the pattern of normalcy, unbroken until today. Someone behind me said something about how good the deviled eggs were. I made a sound like agreement. I tucked the phone back into my purse and kept smiling and felt as if the air in the hall had turned too thin to breathe. On the drive home, I told myself there had to be a simple explanation, an automated message sent by mistake, a lag in their system. Hospitals make clerical errors every day. But when I pulled into our driveway, the thermostat app on my phone pinged. Shop thermostat adjusted to 72 degrees by Tom's profile. Our shop sits behind the house, a low cinder block building with a sagging roof and a hand-painted sign, Whitfield Repairs. Is where Tom kept his tools, his bolts sorted by size in peanut butter jars, and his radio permanently tuned to baseball in the summer and Christmas music too early in the winter. He loved that shop the way other men love boats or golf courses. I stared at the thermostat alert. The system recognized profiles, mine, Tom's, because we'd set them up a couple years ago when our daughter Paige insisted we make the place smart. Tom grumbled then, but he liked telling the thermostat 70 from his recliner. Except Tom couldn't have adjusted anything that afternoon. According to the obituary I'd worked on with Paige and her husband, he had died the previous Tuesday morning after a sudden cardiac event in that very shop. That's what Paige called it when she put the words into the funeral home template. A sudden cardiac event. A neat phrase for a ragged hole. I parked crooked and took the path to the shop with my keys biting my palm. The big lock on the front door was the same one that had stuck every winter for 20 years and suddenly sprang open at the worst possible times. I wrenched it, went inside, and stood still. The shop smelt like lemon cleaner. Tom's bench was tidy in a way he considered a waste of time, with every screwdriver lined by size and the rag bin empty and folded. His thermos was gone. Old Buddy, his hammer with the worn hickory handle, was missing from its peg. The cement floor looked recently mopped. I turned a slow circle. This was not the aftermath of a collapse. There were no paramedic rappers, no scuffs, no chaos. There was a silence that felt curated. That scared me more than any mess would have. On the workbench, near the vise, sat Tom's battered metal lunch pail. It had been his father's before him. He'd taped the latch a dozen times over the years, always with the good duct tape he kept for important things. On the lid, written with a black Sharpie in Tom's careful block letters, was my name, Nora. My hand shook enough to make the tape rattle as I peeled it back. Inside, on top of a folded Cleveland Browns cap, sat a small key on a plastic tag. The tag read Lockbox 317, East Side Storage. Under the cap, one of our grocery store notepads, the crane that says Whitfield on the top because a clerk had thought we were a business once, held a short message. If anybody's telling you I'm gone, check 317. Call June Harper at the recorder's office. Don't sign anything. T. I read the note twice and felt my heart dividing into two versions of itself. The first version whispered, Nora, you're a woman whose husband is dead, and grief is a carnival ride that throws oddities in your path. Stop. Sit down. The second version placed the key into my pocket like it had been waiting to do that all along. I locked the shop and went back into the house. The living room felt wrong, like furniture after a move. I opened my laptop on the kitchen table and logged into our email. Tom's email was still forwarding to me because he never bothered with passwords. In between condolence notes and church meal calendars sat a message from Wellspring Bank. Large cash withdrawal at 2:14 p.m., $2,200. It was his business account, the one we used for the shop. My scalp prickled. The second ping from the thermostat app made me jump. Shop thermostat adjusted to 70 degrees by Tom's profile. I stared at the phone, then at the kitchen clock, then back to the phone as if time would apologize to me for being linear. I didn't bother with a coat. I got in the car and drove to East Side Storage. Lockbox 317 was a narrow metal stall with a corrugated door. The manager was a thin man who looked like someone who remembered every car that had ever parked on his property. He checked my ID against the key tag, made a sympathetic noise, and walked me down 2 rows of identical roll-ups before opening 317 with an efficiency that told me he did this for a living. There were 3 items inside: a banker's box, a small fireproof safe, and Tom's tackle box with the faded sticker that said, "I'd rather be fishing."
I carried them into the weak light. The banker's box held a stack of folders with tabs in Tom's printing. Mortgage, taxes, car, insurance, wills. Then a manila folder marked P and C. Tucked inside were copies of credit card statements I'd never seen before, with charges highlighted in pink, hotel rooms in Columbus, a medical courier service in Cincinnati, and monthly transfers labeled Whispering Pines Companion. There was also a printout of emails between Paige and someone named Donna R.N. about intake assessments and short-term placement. The dates were from the week before Tom died. My fingers were so cold they felt numb, but I kept going. The safe was one of the cheap kinds you buy at a big box store. Tom wasn't a secrets person. He'd chosen our anniversary for the code to the garage door the year the keypad broke, so I tried our wedding date on the safe. It clicked open. Inside was a digital voice recorder, the kind a student might use for a lecture, and a stack of notarized forms clipped together. I pressed play. This is Tom Whitfield. His voice was small and tinny in the storage unit echo. If I don't make it home, there's a reason. Paige and Colton visited me twice this month and kept pushing me to sign new power of attorney papers. Said Nora gets confused. She does not. They brought a mobile notary I didn't recognize. Something is wrong. Also, someone's been calling me from a blocked number about an intake at a memory care place in Riverbend. They used my name. I sat down on the concrete. It leached heat from my bones in a way that felt clarifying. My daughter, my son-in-law. Words like guardianship and power of attorney spread through my head like spilled oil, familiar in concept, suddenly slick under my feet.
I didn't like June Harper. That's important for you to know. When our neighbor's fence drifted 6 inches into our yard after a storm 8 years ago, I brought cookies and a tape measure. June brought her title books. She's the county recorder and the kind of woman who can point to a parcel map like Moses to a tablet. She and I had disagreed loudly and then both done the right thing for the fence, but we didn't make pie together afterward. Still, Tom had said to call her, and Tom didn't spend trust casually, so I took a photo of the note in the lunch pail to have it with me, and I drove straight to the recorder's office. June was behind the counter in a cardigan the exact color of grass. Her hair was pulled back with a barrette that looked like it was designed to hold maps. When I told her why I was there, she didn't say, "I told you the plat line was correct the year we argued." She didn't say anything except, "Come back to my desk." We spread the forms and copies on her desk until it looked like a paper farm. June handled each page with the care of a person who knew how much words could weigh. She tilted toward the light to read the seals on the notarizations, then clicked something on her computer and compared what she saw in her system. Her hum was low and steady, the kind of noise you make to keep yourself from saying something sharp. "These notarizations are sloppy," she finally said. "See this stamp number? Same stamp, 2 different names. That's not allowed. And here, this emergency guardianship petition, it's missing the physician's evaluation. The petitioners need a doctor to certify lack of capacity. This one has a half-filled form and a signature block with no name." "Emergency guardianship," I repeated, rolling the words in my mouth to register their shape. "It's a temporary order the probate court can grant when someone's at immediate risk, like self-neglect or exploitation. It's meant to protect, not to do whatever this is." She tapped a long nail near Paige's signature. I swallowed. "They told me Tom had a heart attack in his shop. We didn't bring in law enforcement. The funeral home handled everything." I heard myself trailing. June looked at me over her glasses. "We should talk to Sergeant Brooks." If you live long enough in a small town, you have a story about Sergeant Dana Brooks. When she was 17, she hit a ball so hard at the district softball tournament that it took a chunk out of a metal sign on the far fence. When she was 35, she talked a man down from the courthouse steps with the patience of a Sunday school teacher. She has a way of looking at you that makes you show up as your better self or look away fast. Dana sat with us in her cramped office while I played the recorder again. She listened without interrupting, then asked me to run through the week leading up to the memorial. I told her about the phone call from Paige that Tuesday morning. Mom, Daddy's gone. And the way she'd taken over, which I had mistaken for kindness. I told her about how Colton had produced business cards for 2 funeral homes like a magician, and how he insisted we didn't need to bother the police because we all know Tom wanted no fuss. You didn't see Tom's body, Dana said softly, not as question, but to put the fact on the table. No, the funeral home said, Paige said. My own voice embarrassed me. I didn't insist. Dana nodded once. We'll loop in Adult Protective Services and the DA. If he's alive, we'll find him. If something else happened, we'll find that too. What about the pharmacy texts and the thermostat alerts? Let's start with the pharmacy, she said. And if you get any more alerts, you call me. Riverbend Pharmacy sits between a nail salon and a Chinese takeout place with a plastic ficus in the window. The clerk at the counter was young, her ponytail threaded through a baseball cap, her nails painted a color that made me think of winter jelly beans. When I showed her the text, she brightened like I'd brought her something to solve. Oh yeah, she said, he just picked up. Paid cash. I remember because he said he hadn't been out much, and the sunlight made him feel like a mole. I gripped the edge of the counter. Who did? Tom, she said, her tone dropping when she registered my face. Mr. Whitfield. He was with a guy with a beard and a camel cap. The guy signed the counseling form because Tom's hands were shakier than usual. She hesitated. Was that not... Should I not have... No, you're fine, I said, though I was badly not fine. Could you print the pickup slip? She glanced at her manager, who was pretending to reorganize greeting cards while watching us with her peripheral vision, then printed the slip and slid it to me like she was passing notes in study hall. It listed the date and time, the medication, and a scribble of a signature. The scribble might as well have read Colton in fire. When I got back to the car, my phone buzzed. Paige. I let it ring once and then answered. Mom? She said, a softness in her voice that would have worked on me any other year of my life. Are you driving around? The sheriff called and said you asked about the pharmacy. You need to rest, okay? The grief's making you... Where is Tom? I said, no question mark, a flat shelf of words. Mama, she said, the softness hardening. Daddy's gone. I know you want to believe otherwise, but this is why Colton and I were looking into options, just to get you some support. Dr. Albertson says, do not schedule appointments for me, I said, and my own calm startled me. Do not bring food. Do not come into my house unless I invite you. She inhaled sharply. You're not well. I'm well enough. And I ended the call. It took me 20 minutes to unclench my hands on the steering wheel. I drove home slowly, the road blurring a little. By the time I pulled into the driveway, Dana's text was waiting. Don't confront them alone. I'm working on APS and a welfare check. Should I go to the shop? I typed. No, she wrote. Go home, lock the doors, drink water. I'll be by. That evening, the doorbell rang. I didn't answer. It rang again. Then Paige's voice, brighter than daylight and twice as insistent. Mom, we brought lemon bars, your favorite. Lemon bars had been my favorite since 1979 when a neighbor dropped some off after my father died, and I decided grief tasted like powdered sugar. I stood in the entryway and watched the shadows under the door shift as they leaned close. The wood smelled like the lemon oil I used to rub into the banister every spring. Somebody knocked on the glass. Nora, Colton called, trying my first name the way a salesman tries a first name. We just want to sit and talk. We think you're making yourself sick chasing things that aren't there. I opened the door because something in me hopes an unanswered knock more than I fear a conversation. I did not unchain it. Paige looked beautiful in a way that made me tired. She's always been pretty, but she's learned how to weaponize it. Gloss and lashes and the right shade of blouse to match whatever tone she needs the world to buy. She held a foil-covered container like a trophy. Hi, Mama, she said, eyes going wide in instant concern. Oh, honey, you look pale.
Honey, I was 67 years old and had raised that girl through chicken pox and band trips and a season of hating all of us on principle, and still she talked to me like a nurse to a patient she planned to bill twice. We'll talk on the porch, I said. I'm not hungry. We made coffee too, Colton said, raising a to-go coffee carrier from that brand you like. I remembered the printed emails in Lockbox 317 about intake assessment. I remembered Tom's voice saying, "Don't sign anything." I thought of the fact that you can dissolve a pill in coffee and stir it just enough to keep it from getting grainy if you know what you're doing. I smiled at the coffee like a person in a commercial, then took the cups and walked them to the kitchen sink, turned on the disposal, and dumped them in. The sound covered my husband's name forming in my throat. Colton's grin twitched. You can't keep fighting us, Nora. It's not safe for you to be alone. The stairs, the stove, God forbid the shop. Paige lined up a tour at Oak Meadow Assisted Living. It's like a resort. They've got crafts. A resort where I pay you to be in charge? It's not like that, Paige rushed. Mama, please. We already have one of the forms filled out. Judge Merrill can fast-track it if the doctor agrees. It's only temporary. We're just protecting you. When's your appointment with Judge Merrill?
She blinked, then lifted her chin. 10 tomorrow. And the doctor, I said. She hesitated. He's reviewed notes. It's normal to decline after a loss. This is about love. I watched my daughter sell me into kindness. It took everything I had not to slam the door. Good night, I said, and closed it gently, because gentleness is sometimes the last weapon you can carry without being arrested. Around 8 the next morning, my phone pinged with a Find Device alert. 2 years earlier, Paige had insisted we connect all our gadgets into a single account because efficiency. It had seemed like a generational hobby, her belief that if something didn't live on a screen, it didn't need to live at all. I hadn't remembered that Tom's old Apple Watch was still on the system until a little map dot pulsed on my screen with a note, last seen 8:17 a.m. The location was a side road outside Riverbend I didn't recognize. I took a screenshot and sent it to Dana and June. Don't go alone, Dana replied. I'm on my way. We caravanned. June behind me in her practical sedan, Dana in a cruiser that made me feel safer just by being in my rearview mirror. The address brought us to a one-story ranch with tidy shrubs and a magnet sign on the mailbox that read, Whispering Pines, Companion Care. There was no business license posted near the door. The porch had 2 rocking chairs that looked purchased for appearances. Dana pressed the doorbell. After a moment, a man with a beard and a camo cap opened the door halfway. Colton. His eyes flicked from Dana's badge to my face to June, who stood behind me like a short, immovable oak. He said, Officer, this is a private residence. Dana said, Adult Protective Services. We received a welfare concern about a vulnerable adult on the premises. You don't have a warrant. We have exigent circumstances, she said. Step aside. A woman in scrubs appeared in the hallway, a name badge clipped to her shirt that said Donna without a last name. She said HIPAA as she were a magic spell. Dana walked past her into the living room. HIPAA protects patients from unauthorized disclosures, not from welfare checks when a person may be in danger. And I watched Colton learn that using big words as shields only works when you know what they mean. The house smelled like microwaved chicken soup in bleach. In a back bedroom where heavy curtains blocked most of the morning light, a television blared a game show. In the bed, under a crocheted afghan I recognized from our guest room closet, lay my husband. He was thinner than last week, and his eyes were unfocused, his skin sallow. He blinked at me twice, fighting his way toward the surface of himself. He said, Nor. His voice scraped the back of my throat. I went to my knees and put my head against his shoulder and breathed in a smell that was hospital and sweat and the laundry detergent I used. I said, Hi, sweetheart. And the word I had trained myself not to use since the memorial came out like a song I knew by heart. Dana took photos of the medication bottles lined up on the trade table. Who prescribed these? She asked the woman in scrubs. Dr. Alberson, she said quickly.
Dana didn't write it down, which told me she knew better than I did whether that was a lie. She kept taking photos. Mr. Whitfield, did you agree to be here? She asked gently. Tom's head moved side to side, slow and stubborn. EMS is en route, she said. Then quietly, to me, we're taking him home to the hospital. Colton started yelling from the kitchen. You don't understand. He's safer here. Maple Ridge Hospital is a joke. We were just helping him until the memorial and the paperwork and... Where is Paige? I asked, because something in me wanted to hear the rest of the plan said out loud. He said, probate court, and realized the admission as it left his lips. Mr. Whitfield, Dana said again to Tom, softer, I'm going to need you to squeeze my hand if you understand me. Tom's fingers wrapped around Dana's hand with all the force he had. She nodded once. Good enough. EMS arrived and transported Tom to Maple Ridge Community Hospital, our small, sturdy building with the emergency room that has seen everything from tractor accidents to Thanksgiving choking scares. The ER doctor on duty was a man I'd seen standing in line at the Bluebird Diner for pancakes on Saturdays. He had kind eyes and the kind of voice that made you believe you weren't an inconvenience. He said, he's sedated. After they settled Tom in a curtained bay and hooked him to monitors. He's dehydrated or going to run labs. From my first look, I don't see evidence of a heart attack or stroke. He needs rest and his wife. I took that last phrase like a handrail. His wife. I stood by Tom's bed and watched the monitor numbers move like a slow language I wanted to learn. At 10:03 a.m., while Tom slept and the machine sighed, June and I walked into probate court with Dana. Judge Merrill is the rare kind of person who can look over her glasses and somehow give you back your spine. Paige was already at a table with an attorney I didn't recognize. She wore a creased blazer and a necklace I'd given her for her 25th birthday. She looked composed, like a news anchor on a calm day. Your Honor, Paige said in a tone made of butter, we're asking for emergency guardianship over my mother. She's driving around the county, making accusations, refusing care. We're concerned she's a danger to herself. June stood and held out a thin stack of papers. Your Honor, the petition is defective. The notarizations use the same stamp across multiple names. The physician's letter is missing. Additionally, we have evidence that the petitioners concealed the whereabouts of Thomas Whitfield, who is alive and in the hospital after being unlawfully removed from his home and placed in an unlicensed facility. The courtroom is a place where words hit different. Paige's face went slack with a kind of shock that would have been purely human if it hadn't been paired with anger. Alive? Judge Merrill asked, blinking once. Is Mr. Whitfield alive? Yes, Dana said. EMS transported him less than an hour ago from a residence operating as a companion care home without a license. We have photographs taken on scene, medication bottles with questionable labeling, and a digital recording made by Mr. Whitfield stating that he felt coerced to sign documents. Paige made a sound like a person who had just swallowed water down the wrong pipe. Mom? She breathed, and I heard in the single syllable an entire timeline of choice points. Colton said we were trying to help. He said the shop was a hazard. We're drowning in loans. Stop, Judge Merrill said. Miss Whitfield, you are under oath as soon as you open your mouth in this room. The judge denied the petition and referred the matter to the district attorney. It happened quickly. June put her hand on my back and pressed once, a woman's version of a salute. Dana told me to go sit with Tom and eat something that wasn't panic. By dinner time, APS had visited the Whispering Pines house with inspectors. By morning, the DA's office had filed charges: unlawful restraint, exploitation of an elderly person, fraud, and operation of an unlicensed care facility. Against Colton, attempted guardianship fraud, and conspiracy against Paige. When Dana called to tell me, I sat on the edge of Tom's hospital bed and felt both lighter and older than I have ever felt in my life. What comes next in a story like this is not a cinematic rush of justice. It's phone calls and copies and forms and a bunch of people who have other cases working late because your case won't let them sleep. It's a whiteboard in our kitchen with columns, meds, PT, APS, DA, Judge, June. It's me learning the names of pills I had never wanted to know and the difference between a level 2 and a level 3 home modification grant. It's Tom learning to tie his shoes again without losing the thread of the loop. The hospital kept Tom for 3 days to stabilize him. He told me what he remembered in stops and starts. Paige had been helping him handle bills after he fell behind on 2 payments when his old truck needed a transmission. Colton had come over to organize the desk and somehow convinced Tom to sign a blank form for the accountant. Tom, who would never have signed something he didn't read under normal circumstances, had felt outnumbered and guilty and old that afternoon and had trusted his daughter to be his daughter. The next week, Colton said he'd scheduled a checkup and brought Tom to a house that smelled like soup and bleach. "They told me it was temporary while you rested," Tom said, his voice breaking on the last word. "They said you were overwhelmed after your mother died, and I didn't want to add to your pile." "Baby," I said, and held his hand, and we both let ourselves grieve the idea that the people we trained ourselves to love were the same people who needed their own lawyer. At home, Maple Ridge did what Maple Ridge does when a person returns from the hospital. Someone from the Ladies' Aid Society brought casseroles, even after I told Paige not to. Wayne from the hardware store delivered a grab bar and refused payment. The fellow from the church who always volunteers to put up the Christmas tree came to fix the back step because he'd been meaning to anyway. June arrived with a binder labeled Whitfield in all caps on the spine and 5 color-coded tabs inside. And if you're not the kind of person who appreciates a good binder, you might not understand how it can feel like someone putting a blanket over your knees on a cold day. Dana came by with a notebook and a request for a statement and the reminder that I did not have to answer any questions I didn't want to. That mattered. So many things that week tried to tell me what I must do. Dana's sentence, "You don't have to," felt like a gift you opened slowly. "Why do people do this?" I asked her one afternoon, and she didn't pretend there was a single reason. "Sometimes it's money," she said. "Sometimes it's a need to be in charge. Sometimes it's fear dressed up as love. Usually it's all the above in a messy stew." The DA called the following week to ask if I would write a statement for sentencing if it came to that. I sat at the kitchen table where we filled out permission slips and paid bills and made grocery lists for 39 years. And I wrote, "Control dressed up as care is still control. Forgery dressed up as love is still theft. You can have hard feelings and still do the right thing. Boundaries don't kill love, they protect it." I didn't go to the first hearing. I stayed home while Tom napped and watered the peace lily a neighbor had brought that I had no business keeping alive with my track record. The next day, Dana called and said Colton had pled not guilty and hired a lawyer with a tie too shiny for our county. Paige cried in the hallway and tried to follow me out when I came to drop off a list the DA needed. And I kept walking because sometime in your life you learn you don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, even if you once rocked her to sleep while humming "You Are My Sunshine." "Sometimes I think you deserve a different daughter," I almost said to Tom in the dark that night. But the truth is, the daughter we had is also the girl who made friendship bracelets at our kitchen table and split her grilled cheese with a neighbor's kid and wept over a 3-legged shelter dog on a rainy Saturday. People People are complicated even when they do unforgivable things, and a heart can hold sorrow and fury at the same time without splitting open.
In the months that followed, my life filled with appointments I would not have understood a year before. A social worker from Adult Protective Services met us at the house and gave us a stack of resources that felt like both hope and homework. The Maple Ridge Senior Center director asked if I would share our experience at a workshop on powers of attorney and guardianships, and I said yes, and then threw up in the church parking lot from nerves an hour before because I had never stood behind a lectern where I wasn't reading a recipe for the bake-off. Tom relearned the rhythm of days. He walked with a physical therapist in a polo with the clinic's logo. He stopped waking at 3 with his heart pounding and the smell of bleach in his nose. He laughed again at the way our neighbor's terrier thinks he's a lion. He hung old Buddy back on his hook in the shop and said, "Not yet, but soon," to the project he'd abandoned in mid-screw. June and I became the kind of friends who share salads with extra pickles at the Bluebird Diner and complain about the price of lettuce like it's a personal affront. She helped us file a fraud alert on our credit reports and put a freeze on everything that moved. She called 3 banks with me on speaker and said, "This is the recorder's office. You'll want to cooperate," in a tone that turned a lot of "I'm sorry, ma'am, that's not our department" into "yes, of course." On a gray Tuesday, the court set a date for Colton's case. I didn't go to the trial either. I had watched enough of those shows to know that courtrooms run on different fuel than living rooms. The DA sent me a summary afterward. Guilty on exploitation and unlawful restraint, guilty on the unlicensed operation, a plea on the fraud count. The judge sentenced him to prison and ordered restitution to the county for APS's emergency response costs. Paige's case took longer. Her lawyer argued she was a victim of her husband's influence, that she was trying to help, that the paperwork errors were mistakes. The DA argued that a person who forges a signature is not confused, she is decisive. In the end, Paige pled to a reduced charge that kept her out of prison but placed her on probation with mandatory counseling and fines and a 5-year prohibition on acting as a fiduciary for any adult. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like a person who had walked a long way in shoes that didn't fit and wanted badly to sit down. On the day we took the "for sale" sign out of the front yard, the one I had not asked to have put there by Colton 3 weeks before the memorial, Tom said, "Let's do something besides survive." So we did. With the senior center director and June and Dana and a lawyer named Mariah who has the calm eyes of a person who reads contracts for fun, we started a series of workshops called Whitfield Night, free, open to anyone who brought their questions and a willingness to sit in a folding chair for an hour. The first Tuesday of every month, I made coffee and lemon bars and donuts, and we talked about how to choose a person to trust with your power of attorney, how to read a guardianship petition before you sign your life away, how to say no with a smile and then a locked door. Dana taught a session on spotting scams and what to say when someone at your door claims a badge. June taught a masterclass on what a legitimate notarization looks like. Mariah explained the papers so plainly that even a person who finds forms threatening could see the shape of her own rights. People came. They brought their moms and their sons and a neighbor who had had a close call. They asked questions I recognized from my own head. What if it's my child? What if I'm wrong and they're right? What if saying no makes me lonely? We answered the best we could and told the truth when we didn't know. We made a list of phone numbers to put on the fridge long before you ever need to call them. We wrote in big letters, "You are allowed to take time. You are allowed to ask for a second opinion. You are allowed to decline a signature." One month, a woman named Teresa came in with a folder so stuffed it looked like it might burst. Her brother had been pushing her to sign some things to make it easier, and she had hesitated because the hairs on her arms had done the thing hairs do when your gut is smarter than your mouth. With Mariah's help and June's map of the process, she found her footing in front of a judge the next week and walked right back out with her agency intact and a plan for the future that didn't include handing her life to a person who loved her in the way that breaks things. There were quiet ripple effects, too.
The pastor asked if he could add a line to his funeral planning checklist that said, "Family aware that notification to law enforcement is appropriate in certain circumstances." The funeral director started pausing to ask, "Would you like the police involved?" instead of assuming the answer was no. The Riverbend pharmacy manager tightened up their ID requirements when someone other than the profile came to pick up a refill. The Bluebird Diner taped a flyer to the cash register about guardianship rights, right next to the daily special. It looked funny there, until it didn't. One afternoon in early spring, I was out in the garden planting pansies around the mailbox when a car I recognized turned the corner. Paige parked 2 houses down and sat with the engine running for a full minute. Then she turned it off and walked towards me slowly, her hands empty. "Hi, Mama," she said when she reached the sidewalk. She looked like nobody's news anchor. She looked like a tired woman who'd run out of performances. "Hi," I said, standing straight up. My knees popped. My hands were dirty, and I was never more grateful for dirt. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said quickly. "I'm not here to convince you. My counselor said if I ever came, I should say that part first." I nodded. "Thank you." We stood like that for a while, 2 women who knew each other's baby teeth and worst tantrums, bound by blood and history and a recent betrayal that made both of us want to crawl out of our skins. She told me she was working part-time at a daycare. She told me she was going to meetings where people say their names out loud and the room answers. She said she was trying to pay the fines 1 check at a time. "I wrote you letters," she said, her voice wobbling. "I knew you weren't reading them. That's okay. They were for me." I opened one and watched hope flash and then bank itself on her face. "Not yet, but I will. I will when I can read it without tasting bleach." She laughed in a way that hurt both of us a little. Fair enough. When she left, I went inside and washed my hands twice, then made tea and sat at the kitchen table and cried into a paper towel because the cloth ones were in the wash, and I am a person who can hold the world together and choose a paper towel and cry all at once.
I am not a saint, and I am not a fool. I am a woman who knows that forgiveness is not a door you throw open to let a thief back in. It is a window you crack open to let the stale air out so you can breathe. I do not know if my daughter and I will ever share a Thanksgiving table again. I do know that I will not hand her the key to my house until she hands me proof I can hold, not just promises. Somewhere a person is reading this and exhaling because she thought she was the only one who drew a line where Christmas used to be. You're not alone. The line is a mercy. At night now, when the house is quiet and Tom's breathing is even in the chair we swore we were going to replace and never did, I sometimes take out the old lunch pail with the duct tape that saved our lives. I run my fingers over the letters of my name the way women touch things after the emergency is over, as if the object can tell them how they did it. Then I put it back because my life is not a monument. It's a porch light on a timer and the smell of coffee at 7 and the thermostat ping that makes me laugh. The ping came last week when I was paying a bill online and humming a hymn my mother loved to sing off key. Shop thermostat adjusted to 72 degrees by Tom's profile. I called to him in the shop, "Hey, did you bump the heat again?" And he called back, "Maybe I did, Nor. Maybe I did." I walked out and he was standing by old Buddy, his hand steady on the handle. And when he looked up, his eyes were all the way back. People ask for the moral, like there's a version of events that can be boiled into fortune cookie paper. I don't know if there is one moral, but here are the ones that won't let me sleep if I don't say them out loud. Love without boundaries is surrender. Love with boundaries is safety. If something feels off, pause, document, verify. If someone says, "Don't worry, just sign," worry and don't sign. Keep your bank accounts boring and your passwords interesting.
Put your grown child's name on your emergency contact form if she's earned it, not because she shares your cheekbones. Put the phone numbers of people who don't flinch into your favorites. Your doctor, your pastor, your neighbor who would come get you at 2 in the morning without asking questions. The sergeant who can stop a room with a look. Print copies. Make a binder. Name the binder after yourself. One more thing. Do not underestimate the kindness of your own town. I know not every town is Maple Ridge. Some places will fail you. But there are more good people than bad, and most of them are just waiting to be asked. The world is full of Dana Brooks who will stand in your kitchen and make you breathe, and June Harpers who will pull up a plat map and a statue and a pen you can borrow, and neighbors who will put a pie on your porch without ringing the bell because they know you're not ready to open the door yet.
Tonight, the porch light will click on at dusk like it always does. Tom will say the lantern is too bright, and I will say that our daughter used to complain about the same thing when she snuck out to look at the stars and came back smelling like cut grass. The terrier next door will bark at a squirrel with a conviction that makes me want to put him on the ballot. I will tuck a lemon bar into a paper napkin and bring it over to the widow on the corner whose son is still living in her basement and calling it a plan. We will talk about the weather more than people think two women can, because weather is really about hope, about what you can expect and what you prepare for. I will brush my teeth and lay out my church clothes for the morning and set the coffee pot and check the thermostat and lock the back door and then unlock it again because Tom forgets his keys on purpose to make me come outside for a minute and look at the night sky with him. We will stand in the cool air and count how many porch lights are on up and down our street. Each one is a little square of stubbornness, a refusal to go dark just because something tried to blow us out. If you're listening to this and your house feels dim right now, if your porch light burned out and you don't have a ladder yet, consider this me handing you mine. Consider this me saying what I needed someone to say to me the day the pharmacy text landed like a stone in my stomach. You are not crazy for noticing what doesn't fit. You are allowed to take the next right step without asking permission from the person causing the wrong. I want to end where this began, at a table with too much food because people didn't know what else to bring. I think about that cake sometimes, the blue icing names and the way the knife cut the letters in half and nobody minded because we were eating grief like sugar. I think about how easily we all swallow certain words when we're tired. Sudden cardiac event, emergency guardianship, just temporary. I think about the alternate universe in which I didn't check my phone, didn't open a lunch pail, didn't insist on seeing my husband with my own eyes. That universe is very close to this one. It is a single decision away. It terrifies me. It steadies me. Tom is asleep in his chair as I finish this, his mouth open in a way that would embarrass him if he knew it. His hands are calloused in a way fewer men's are now. Tomorrow morning, we will go to church and stand near the back because I still can't sit near the front where the echoes of last month live. People will ask how we're doing, and I will tell them the truth I can carry that day. The truth is a shifting shape. Some days it is the weight of a binder. Some days it is the lightness of a thermostat ping. Some days it is a lemon bar I didn't eat because it wasn't safe that day. And some days it is a lemon bar I made for someone else because it was. If you take only one thing from all these words, let it be this. The person you choose to be when nobody is watching is the person who shows up when everybody is. Choose her now. Teach your papers and your passwords and your plans to serve her future. If a knock comes at your door with kindness in its mouth and control in its pocket, you are allowed to say, "We'll talk on the porch," and then not talk at all.
You are allowed to pour the coffee out and call the officer whose number is already in your favorites. You are allowed to keep your life, even from the people who think it already belongs to them. And if you ever find yourself holding a metal lunch pail with duct tape on the lid and your name written plain, open it. It might not hold a key to a storage unit. Maybe it holds a note you wrote to yourself the last time you were brave, reminding you how you did it. Maybe it holds a fingerprint from the person who loved you long and well enough to trust you with the truth. Either way, it will fit in your hands. Either way, you will know what to do next.